Hello, you are tuning into Uneducated Guests with Josiah. I'm your host, Josiah. I'm a senior in high school that has to do a project for a college class, but didn't feel like looking anything up, so here I am.
I'm Jace Vogel.
Yeah, I was gonna introduce. This is Jace, and this is our first live video podcast, episode 13 on Elder Scrolls lore. So I've also got an audience because the entire class is with me, surprisingly. And so I guess we're just going to get started in this. So, Jace, there's several races in the Elder Scrolls universe, including Argonians, which are lizard people of Blackmarsh, Altmer, High Elves, Bosmer, which are Wood Elves, Bretons, Khajiit, which are just like large humanoid, not like cats, Redguards, Nords, which are just basic humans. So, who do you think the Dwemer are, also referred to as the Deep Ones?
So the deep ones, I feel like they live in a big, underground pit. And they go around, attacking little children. Could you repeat the name one more time?
They are known as Dwemer and or Deep Ones.
So, Dwemers, I feel like they're, small people, small midgets, and it's like a free-for-all run-around, attacking little kids with, swords.
So that just took a dark turn. But you did get one part right. They are definitely short, and they do live not really in one underground. They're all over, but they are definitely underground. Murray used the term Dwemer, roughly translated as people of the deep. The term also connotated deep delving, profound, and close-counseled. Men commonly refer to them as dwarves in reference to the fables of the giants seeing them as small. The Dwemer were an advanced race and civilization in many respects far ahead of the other races and civilizations of their time. They are well known for their skill in revolutionary developments in technology, engineering, crafting methods, developments in technology. I just read that again. Metalwork, stonework, architecture, city planning, science, mathematics, magic, and the academic arts. So they're not necessarily going around killing kids or anyone. They're more of a scientific race, and they're like philosophers in that sense. So along with the Dwemer, who do you think the Falmer are?
The Falmer? Oh,
I will give you a hint. They're more closely related to what you first described.
okay, so they're not midgets. They're right above the midget level, which is about 4 foot 4'2", maybe. But I mean, are they scientists maybe? Or I mean, who knows? They could live in big caves.
Well, the Falmer are the degenerated descendants of an endangered species of elves known as snow elves, who dwell in the ancient Dwemer ruins carved from Skyrim's expansive subterranean caverns. Although blind, their senses of hearing, smell, and touch are attuned far beyond those of most other races. A common misconception among the people of Tamriel is that the snow elves were tricked by the Dwemer into eating a mushroom native only to Blackreach, which then turned them into the repulsive creatures they are today. However, an unsullied snow elf by the name of Knight Paladin Gelibor stated that with the little chance of survival, they willingly took to servitude and the poison. Years of slavery and living underground turned them into the blind and twisted race they currently are. Which, the Falmer are basically kind of just large goblins, in a sense, and they're very hive-minded. They've got very pale skin because the snow elves were once white. So they're really grayed out. They've got sharpened fangs for most of their teeth, really pointed ears that you can use their ears in crafting potions because it's an ingredient, Falmer ears. But they do come out from underground in the Dormer ruins to attack travelers on roads and stuff like that a lot of the time. So going into all this is all basically just about the Dwemer and things around them. So, well, for this part, how do you think the Dwemer mysteriously disappeared?
So, they were once white.
No, that was the Falmer.
Oh.
I mean, the Dwemer were also white, but they came in different shades.
Okay. Wow, this took a random turn. So is this area like a lot of snow?
Actually, it is because the Dwemer are all basically in Skyrim, which is like snow-covered mountains and stuff like that. But all the Dwemer lived underground and built all their giant cities and stuff underground. But they were philosophers.
Okay, so philosophers underground. Maybe that's how they disappeared. No one knew they were underground, and well, I mean, you got the snow-covered mountains. It's like if you're short enough, you can just go dive right in, hide from everyone.
Can you go into more detail on what you mean by that?
So if the snow is 4 feet tall, and you walk in it as a 3'9" person, you're gonna be hidden in the snow, which is basically like walking underground, and that's how they hid from everyone.
So you think the Dwemer are just hiding in the snow?
Yes.
Okay then. Well, no one really knows what happened during the disappearance. They just know generally the time frame because that's when the Falmer kind of took over the Dwemer ruins. But the disappearance of the dwarves was a major event that took place in 1E700. The event came about as a result of the events at the Battle of Red Mountain, which brought about the near complete disappearance of the entire Dwemer race, save one, Yargrum Bagarn. I'm going to butcher these names this entire time. But a lot of people assume that since they were philosophers and scientists, that they were doing scientific experiments throughout their disappearance because no one can still figure out how they discovered all this stuff. But one of their philosophers, Kagranak, the great Dwemer engineer, used profane tools which are known as Wrathguard, Keening, and Sunder, and specific rituals to attach the Dwemer race to the power of the Heart of Lorkhan, which for one reason or another caused the destruction of the entire race. So a lot of this, the Heart of Lorkhan is basically the heart of a Daedric god, which is a literal god in the world of Elder Scrolls. But you sort of learn, because you do get a chance to see the dagger Keening in Skyrim, which is with Arniel Gain, and he disappears as a consequence of his research with the Warped Soul Gem, which is just a soul gem for trapping souls, but it was warped beyond use. So the Dragonborn gains the ability to summon his shade in battle, and so Arniel's Gain shade can be seen wandering the area around the College of Winterhold after his questline has been completed. So basically all this happens after Arniel Gain uses Keening on the Warped Soul Gem. His soul basically, he just disappears entirely, but his soul is somehow bound to the Dragonborn. So a lot of people believe that the dwarves were using the Heart of Lorkhan and got bound to it, but the Heart of Lorkhan was put into something called the Brass Tower. The Numidium, which I'm probably also butchering, also known as the Brass God or Brass Tower, is a colossal humanoid golem creature created by the Dwemer, said to have been 1,000 feet tall. 2 installments of the Elder Scrolls series, the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall and the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, involve the Numidium, or at least its concept as a central element in their stories. The Numidium was designed by Kagranak, a Dwemer tonal architect during the First Era, and was intended to serve as a god of sorts for the Dwemer people. There are many theories that proposed that it was built to allow them for the mortal plane's transcendence. The original power source was the heart of Lorcan, whose power the Dwemer had accessed using Karganak's tools, Keening, Sunder, and Wrathguard. It was first used in the Battle of Red Mountain, when Chimer forces assailed the Dwemer stronghold and captured it after the mysterious disappearance of the Dwemer. So there are Daedric gods. Who do you think the Daedric god Hircine is?
It sounds like a girl.
Okay, so the thing about Daedric gods, I think, so a lot of them are like generally dressed as females, but they're all referred to as Daedric princes.
Okay then. Ooh, that changes everything. So if they're the Daedric princes, I about said princess, my bad. I could see him as like the knights on shining armor, with shining armor, riding their horses to like a castle, getting ready to like fight off the ultimate dragon. And so besides that, they're like very, very good philosophers and scientists combined.
Okay, so the Daedric gods are philosophers, or they're not philosophers because they're all-knowing beings that aren't really on the mortal plane of existence, and most of them, well, actually all Daedric gods except like a few of them, are considered evil. So does that change your answer at all?
So they're evil knights with shining armor. I mean, maybe the dragon's on their side. They're not philosophers, and I guess they're just like other gods. So it's like Hercules is like the god of war.
Okay then. So Hircine is the spirit of the hunt's past, leads many to argue he himself was never mentioned or heard of in the early histories of Nirn, which is basically it's the world Nirn. Some scholars believe because of that, Hircine was not one of the original Daedric princes and is therefore a spawn or offshoot similar to Malakath. However, this is often shunned on account of Hircine creating lycanthropes and the disease existing well into the Merithic era. Hircine also appears within the mortal realm once every 1,000 years, but not to destroy like most princes, but to enjoy a great hunt known as the Blood Moon Prophecy. And so it said lycanthropes is what he created. What do you think lycanthropy is?
Lycanthropy. Well, it is a disease of not liking someone. It could be the study of like ancient dinosaurs. I also have one more question. So this sounds a lot like Narnia and like Twilight combined. So like Narnia, you got like the dwarves, and then you got the ice princess with her like dragon dogs. Then you got Twilight with like the blood moon. Like, are there like vampires and like werewolves in this?
Well, you inherently answered this question. Lycanthropy is the disease that causes werewolves. So yes, there is werewolves and vampires and evil gods all in this. So it referred to Malakath as not being an original Daedric prince. How do you think he became one?
Well, how did he become a prince? Well, you see, in like the early dinosaur age, whenever the so like you had the princess.
Okay, can I interject?
Wait. So there was normally a king and queen, and they would like take the sword and put it on both of their shoulders, and it's like you are now pronounced like instead of husband and wife, it's prince and princess. So I think that's how he became the prince.
Okay, so there's no dinosaurs in Skyrim, but there are woolly mammoths. And that's how people were knighted, not prince and princesses. Prince and princesses were the daughters of kings and queens. But in the middle of the Merethic era, a group of Aldmer and their leader Trinimac attempted to halt the movement of the prophet Veloth and the Chimer. The Daedric prince Boethia devoured Trinimac, corrupting his body and spirit, and emerged from the reigns of Trinimac as the Daedric prince Malakoth. He's the god of curses, the betrayed, and the ostracized. So basically, the Daedric prince Boethia ate Trinimac, and his excrement was Malakoth. How does that make you feel?
First off, I want to know why people are eating other people. We call that cannibalism, and that is like not legal anywhere.
While cannibalism is a crime in Skyrim, there is a god or a Daedric prince of disgust, which is Namira. And for that quest line, you do have to eat a person. And Daedric princes aren't actual people. I will mention this again. They are the gods of this game.
So the gods eat other people. This isn't normal.
Well, Skyrim and all of this is basically a medieval type based game. So it's all set in the past with like magic and different things like that. So you did mention vampirism and werewolves. What do you think a daughter of Cold Harbor is?
Well, it's the daughter of a Cold Harbor. It's like the werewolves have like their leader, the vampires have their leader. I think she would be on the vampire side, mainly because they are wider than everyone else. And like they run really fast. So maybe she could swim really fast.
Okay, so I mean, you are basically right. A daughter of Cold Harbor is a female individual who is granted vampirism via a ritual that we won't go into on this podcast. It's not PG. With the creator and patron deity of vampires, which is the Daedric prince Molag Bal. Okay, so since there is werewolves and vampires, how many were creatures do you think there is in the Elder Scrolls series?
The Elder Scrolls series.
Like were creatures, like werewolves is one of them. But how many more do you think there are?
Oh, there could be millions of kinds of werewolves. I mean, that's a tough question. There could be like 30 different kinds. There could be one different kind.
What animals do you think should be were creatures? Like humans transform into them.
Everyone but the vampires. So like the dwarves, especially, they're small and they can run fast. As far as like the prince and princesses, I mean, at some point they get eaten by the werewolves, so anything can happen.
Okay, so that's not really the answer I was looking for, but and Hircine is the Daedric prince of the hunt. So basically all were creatures, when they die, they have to go to his afterlife and hunt with him for basically forever. But there are 4 were creatures in the game. There is werewolves, which are mentioned in several different Elder Scrolls games. There's werebears, which are on Solicium, which is the DLC for Skyrim, basically. It's a small island to the northwest of Skyrim, I believe. There's werevultures, which are only Bosmer. which are wood elves, but those have only been mentioned. There's also were-crocodiles, which are the lizard race I mentioned earlier, Argonians, but those have only been mentioned. They've never been seen in-game. So a lot of these games, we've been going over Skyrim and different lore like that. What do you think the Oblivion Crisis was? Mind you, the game before Skyrim was Oblivion.
The Oblivion Crisis was a very, very big crisis of Oblivion. I have no idea what Oblivion means. But it's like, so it's like you take World War III and mix it with like World War 3.0. It's like that if it ever happened. But World War III is like vampires and werewolves instead of actual people. So it's like Twilight all over again. You all meet in a big field. You run at each other at really fast speeds, and you pounce on one another till someone unfortunately falls over.
That's so Oblivion Crisis happened before Skyrim. Basically, the game was set, and the Oblivion Crisis is also known as the Great Anguish to the Altmer, which are the High Elves, or the Time of Gates to Mankar Cameron, he's kind of insane. He wrote basically an entire book about how to do a ritual to summon. So basically, they were summoning a god. It was a period of major turmoil and armed conflict fought between the Tamrielic Empire and the Plains of Oblivion, which is, oh crap! Now I can't think of it. It's a Daedric Prince. So it's the Daedric Plains of Oblivion, and encompassing the events of the assassination of Uriel Septim V2, which while you are in the Oblivion jail, because all of them start out you're in prison, you actually witness his murder from an assassin. I can't think of it now. The Daedric invasion of Tamriel, the destruction of Kvatch, the battles of Bruma, and the Battle of the Imperial City. The Oblivion Crisis is noted as being a significant event in Tamrielic history as it marks the close of the Third Era and the end of the Septim Dynasty. The crisis affected nearly all parts of Tamriel, however, the bulk of the fighting occurred in the province of Cyrodiil. And so, seeing as how all that happened, the Oblivion Crisis didn't just affect Cyrodiil, which is where it mainly happened. It affected all parts of Nirn and Tamriel. So, with that, what do you think the Hist are?
The Hist? Oh my goodness. It's like, so it's like you said, it's like a bunch of werewolves hissing at one another. I mean, I highly doubt it's people because, I mean, you don't normally see, one person, hissing at another like a cat. That's just, uncommon around here. Stuff happens.
Okay, so we are far from werewolves. We're not talking about werewolves anymore, but the Hist are a race of sentient trees that are said to have once been spread over a wide area of Nirn, but are now almost solely confined to Black Marsh. Some claim that they are almost like the most ancient race on Nirn. They are associated with the Argonians, who venerate them, but they are not worshipped in the traditional sense of the term. The Hist produce a sap that is used by Argonians in a variety of cultural practices, as well as which stimulating particular growth patterns in the Argonian which determine its gender. The sap also induces visions for Argonians who treat these as sacred experiences. It is also prized by other races as an ingredient, and tainted samples can function as a hallucinogen in sufficient quantities. The sap is poisonous to all races. The Hist brought Argonians back to Black Marsh to defend against the Oblivion Crisis at the end of the Third Era, directing them in attacks that defeated Mehrunes Dagon's forces, and then on to the subsequent invasion of Morrowind following the Red Year. That's who the Daedric God was that was caused the Oblivion Crisis. He basically had the cult of the Mythic Dawn was his cult, Mehrunes Dagon, basically wanted to bring that Daedric prince into the realm of Tamriel, which would have basically killed everyone. So now that you know what the Hist is and that they helped actually communicate telepathically with all the Argonians, how do you feel about that?
So it's like, so I guess the werewolves are dead now. So now it's the vampires. So they communicate telepathically through like whose blood they drink or eat. I don't know if you eat blood, but I mean it's possible. But I mean telepathically is like communicating from one brain to the other. So maybe they have like half of their brain and half of someone else's brain, and that's how they communicate.
Okay then, so what do you think Umbriel is? And I will say this, it came from a piece of Oblivion, which is Mehrunes Dagon's realm, his like plane of existence, which is where like his demons and stuff are. And it also has to do with the Hiss started in Umbriel. So what do you think Umbriel exactly is? Okay, so Umbriel is a floating island ripped straight from the realm from where the Hist originated. Okay.
In defense, Asgard is a floating place with like a huge waterfall. So, and I don't think Asgard is like underground, or else that'd be like the dwarves, like living under the snow. And you can't really have a waterfall like underground unless it's in a cave. But I think it's like floating up in the air somewhere. It's like, who knows? Maybe the astronauts can find it landing on the moon somewhere.
Okay, so you did mention dwarves with the MC universe. Well, the dwarves, they basically lived around neutron stars. I'm just going to point that out. And so Umbriel existed within a bubble of oblivion that and was described as an upside-down cone. Within lay a conical valley filled with a water lake called the Sump, warrens cut into the valley slopes for workers and lesser denizens, ever more splendid palaces for the lords, and at the very tops of the city, the home of the highest lords. On the rim at the very top lay a thick forest of trees very similar to the Hist. The lord of Umbriel is named Vuhan. And so we already mentioned the sap of the Hist, giving people's telekinetic powers, but that sap doesn't really have a name. But there is a sap with a certain name. Where do you think sleeping tree sap comes from?
I think it comes from the bees who make the honey. I mean, there's maple sap. That's how you make maple syrup. Put on your pancakes. So what was the name of the sap again?
Sleeping tree sap.
You sleep on a tree whenever you touch the sap. So it's like a bunch of squirrels like jumping out of a tree to like attack you. And well, whenever they attack you, you end up like sleeping on the tree, except you're not asleep, you're actually like dead. But that's what I think the sleeping tree sap is.
basically, the Hist came from the floating island in Oblivion known as Umbriel, which was held in place by Vivek, who was one of 3 immortal god kings. After Vivek's disappearance, however, the Ingenium was built to keep the Ministry of Truth afloat, which is what the island Umbriel was turned into, which was basically a place with prophets and like preachers and stuff like that of the thing. But the only problem was the Ingenium needed souls to be powered. At first, it consumed as much as 10 souls per day. Criminals were used to power the Ingenium, but eventually a Wuhan discovered that appropriate souls could power it for months. He selected a Dunmer named Ilzaven to power the Ingenium. Ilzaven's man, Sol, thought the Wuhan had selected her because she loved him instead of Wuhan. Sol tried to save Ilzaven, but he destroyed the Ingenium and killed Ilzaven. Then the island floated all over Tamriel and supposedly dropped a seedling over Skyrim that became the Sleeping Tree, which means that those who ingest Sleeping Tree sap could be controlled by the tree, as much as the Hist telepathically controlled the Argonians to bring them back to Blackmarsh, which was basically, this is not canon, but this is what a lot of people believe, that the Hist don't care about anyone else but themselves, so they basically self-preserved so the Argonians could fight off the Imperial invasion to save the Hist trees. So that's basically all the information I have for you today. And upon learning this, how do you feel about all this knowledge you have gained?
Okay, so this game is a big version of Thor from Asgard, Twilight, and Narnia. I learned a lot of knowledge today from this. Mainly the knowledge I already knew. But I mean, I feel much more confident like going in to play it because I know like in the end the vampires win and the werewolves all die off from sleeping trees and squirrels. But besides that, go vampires.
Okay, so as you guys know, I usually do say the links I got these from, but they will be on the YouTube description because I got all of these from the same site, the elderscrolls.fandom.com wiki, but I did use obviously different articles. So thank you for watching this episode. I hope it's enjoyable, and thank you for your time, Jace. I will see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you. Good night.